Hey, it's Nick over at Curbside Auto Repair. Today I'm going to be talking about brake jobs, front brake jobs specifically, and rotor replacement as opposed to cutting or just leaving it alone. Now, on front brakes, I always recommend replacing the rotor. Rear brakes a little different. Rear brakes on modern day cars do not do near the amount of work that the front brakes do, and so leaving the rear brake rotors alone, as long as they're not pitted or rusty or damaged in any way, is usually okay. Sometimes they get warped and sometimes they need to be replaced, but in general, they need much less replacement than the front. The fronts, I always recommend replacing the front rotor on the modern day car with every brake job, and I'm going to explain why. So here we are with your basic setup. Okay, your basic car has brake pads on either side of a rotor. Okay, now what happens as you use the brake on and off, you're heating and cooling this rotor, which is made out of a cast steel or steel. And what happens as this rotor gets hot and cools over time, it starts warping. Okay, that's a little exaggerated, but you get the idea. So as the rotor gets warped, what it does is it'll start wearing your brake pads unevenly. And this will cause noise, very possibly. What it really will start causing, though, is less and less brake capability. The brakes won't work as well as they used to, and when the rotor gets quite warped, it will cause a pulsation. So what happens is with this warped, all right, you step on the brake and these pads push and get pushed away by the rotor, and they kind of go on and off, and they kind of grab the rotor and release the rotor, and that makes the wheels pull. And what you feel in your car is in your steering wheel, you feel the steering wheel shaking back and forth, and as soon as you let go of the brakes, that goes right away. Okay, that's called a brake pulsation, and it's caused by warped rotors. All right, now let's pull that back. So why do the rotors warp? Well, modern day rotors warp mostly because they are made much thinner and lighter than the older rotors. Okay, if you take a look here, we have the newer model style and the older style. So the older rotors, okay, were much thicker. They gave you much more meat between these vent holes. These are vent holes right here. These are all vent holes. All right. Now, the older rotors, you had more meat around those vent holes, so you could cut. It was expected that you would cut the rotor. Okay. Also, in this cast steel was a large hat here, which was a solid chunk of steel that the studs for the lug nuts went through, and then the area where the bearing went through. Okay, and you had two bearings that were in here as well. This was quite a heavy piece of mass, and it's much harder to warp a massive piece like this than it is to do the modern day rotor, which is over here. We call this a hat style rotor. First of all, they made the vents, the cooling vents, larger, okay, and they've given you much less area to cut. All right, the hub itself is separate from the rotor, all right, giving it the word hat style. Okay, there's no studs in the rotor. The centerpiece is hollow. This here piece is just a simple piece of steel. It's quite thin. All right, this slides over which the hub that is mounted on the car, and as you can see, this is they make these hubs very minimal. They're trying to reduce rotating mass for other reasons, not for braking reasons, but for other reasons. It helps in braking at some point too, but it doesn't help with heat in braking. So this is what they're doing to design it, and it makes it much harder to cut. If you were to cut this rotor, which you could do, and it would solve your pulsation or your warp, fix your warped rotor, but you thin this material even more, and so once it gets hot again, it's going to take less time for it to rewarp. All right, as opposed to this thing, this was a beast. All right, so that's why I recommend you replace this. Another reason I recommend you replace it and instead of do nothing, if you're warped, okay, like that, all right, and now we're going to put a brand new brake pad on. All right, so this is the new brake pad. We put it on and there's our warped rotor. As you can see, this is extreme, but you can see that the rotor is just wearing on this corner of this brake pad. So this is going to give you the possibility of having a squeak or a grinding noise. You could actually not have a pulsation to start with, and you put new pads on, and now you do have a pulsation. Okay, and it's going to cause premature wear of your new brake pads. So your brake job that you just had done is not going to last as long as it should have or could have. All right. So, in any way, this is this is just my explanation as to why at curbside I always recommend that a customer you replace the rotor. Okay, on the modern day cars, it's just a good move. It's makes the car safer. It means you will get the best longevity out of the brake pads and the rotor that we replace. You're going to get the best job. You're going to have the best chance of not having squeaks or grinds or any of that annoyance happening. And so there you go. I hope that explains it to you. I hope that solves some questions that I've had from customers. And I hope to see you soon. Um, Thanks for watching. This is Nick Curbside.